Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: Sudan civilians used as human shields. Indian youth end protest after Modi's education minister quits. US military damage marks end of an era in Middle East strategy. Houthis may be using real-time satellite intelligence for targeting. Super El Niño will impact African economies. And why 156 years old is the maximum human lifespan. Starting with politics, Indian youth end protest after Modi's education minister quits. The Cockroach Janta Party began as a satirical youth movement just a few months ago, but has since emerged as a rallying point for disillusioned young people across India. Protesters ended weeks of demonstrations after Prime Minister Modi responded to demands, including calls to fix a cheating-prone exam system. Argentina President Milei flies to Brazil to kickstart Bolsonaro election bid. The rare endorsement of a foreign head of state at the Argentinian nominating convention offers Bolsonaro's campaign a fresh boost of energy after months of scandal and infighting. The son of former President Jair Bolsonaro has slipped behind President da Silva in the polls. Syria seeking security deal with Israel. It comes after repeated Israeli incursions and strikes in southern Syria, since President al-Sharaa came to power in December 2024 following the collapse of the Assad government. Al-Sharaa said Syria is avoiding any clashes with Israel and that a security arrangement could pave the way for a broader and more comprehensive resolution to the crisis. Sheikh Hasina ally to step down as Bangladesh's president. President Shahabuddin's resignation comes days after his former ally, ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, said that she would return to Bangladesh, where she faces the death penalty for crushing student-led protests in 2024, which led to the toppling of her government. Senegal's Faye launches a new party, formalizing split with former ally Sonko. It sets up a struggle for control of the reform movement that swept them to power in 2024. The creation of Kirai. The Republican Patriots formalized the collapse of the alliance between Faye and Sonko after months of tensions over the direction of the government and Senegal's mounting economic challenges. Moving to stories in conflict, US military damage sustained through Iran war marks end of an era in Middle East strategy. 5 months into a conflict that has already cost $37.5 billion, the US has suffered significant losses to personnel, bases, and hardware, with analysts warning the war has exposed structural weaknesses in American military strategy that will have long-term consequences. A $1.15 trillion military spending package has been cleared despite opposition over spiraling costs. The US has worn down its weapon supply in a way that defense experts had not anticipated. Sudan civil war. Civilians used as human shields. The situation in the besieged city of El Obeid is worsening, with rights organizations warning of mass atrocities. Drone attacks by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces have caused enormous damage to civilian infrastructure, including power grids, transformers, water treatment plants, schools, universities, and hospitals. El Obeid is a strategically important location, a trading hub in the middle of the desert on the only major route between Sudan's capital, Khartoum, which is controlled by the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the western Darfur region, large parts of which are under the control of the RSF. Houthis may be using real-time satellite intelligence for targeting. 3 attacks on Saudi-flagged tankers in quick succession, including one vessel operating within Saudi coastal waters rather than near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, suggest the Houthis have moved beyond opportunistic, indiscriminate targeting to a more precise, intelligence-driven campaign. Analysts believe Iran has supplied access to Russian, Iranian, and Chinese satellite constellations, providing near real-time high-resolution imagery, the same systems thought to be behind recent accurate strikes on US bases in the Gulf. Israeli settlers set fire to West Bank mosques after deadly clash. Israeli settlers attacked Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank, reportedly setting fire to 2 mosques.
The attacks followed an incident when 4 Palestinians and 2 Israeli soldiers, one of whom acted as a security coordinator for a nearby Israeli settlement, were killed when a crowd of Israeli settlers, some armed, approached the Palestinian village of Tal. Romania shoots down 3rd Russian drone. A Romanian F-16 fighter jet pilot shot down a Russian drone over the Black Sea, the latest in a series of breaches of the NATO members' airspace that President Dan called inadmissible and intolerable. Romania shares a 650-kilometer border with Ukraine, and Russian drones have repeatedly violated its airspace during the more than 4-year Ukraine war.
Now for the latest economics news. Countries with the most government debt in 2026. The US is projected to hold $40.7 trillion in government debt in 2026, the highest total worldwide, but relative to GDP, not in the top 10. Japan has the world's highest government debt relative to the size of its economy, at 204% of GDP. Several European economies rank among the world's most indebted by GDP, despite carrying much smaller total debt than the US or China. Super El Niño will negatively impact African economies. Climate experts warn that an impending Super El Niño will have a negative impact on African economies and trigger mass migration from hard-hit areas. African Development Bank specialists said it is likely to inflict a combined $10 billion to $20 billion hit on affected countries and will reduce the GDP of heavily impacted countries by 1 to 2% on average, with the effects potentially lasting for years. Brussels fines Google $1.02 billion, despite looming new US tariffs. It found Google favored its own services in search results and restricting app developers, despite Washington imposing a fresh set of trade tariffs ranging from 10% to 12.5% and accounting for most American imports, targeting key economic partners over claims they have failed to properly tackle forced labor, including the UK, China, the EU, Canada, Japan, and India. China's industrial profit growth moderates as exports cushion uneven recovery. Exports and industrial production have done much of the heavy lifting for the world's second-largest economy. Persistent weakness in consumption and the property sector, however, helped drag second-quarter growth to its slowest pace in more than 3 years, keeping calls alive for further policy support to address economic imbalances. Panama Canal suspends part of ship booking system amid weather and trade disruption fears. The Panama Canal Authority is temporarily halting part of its vessel booking system, with shipping agents citing a potential El Niño weather event that could reduce the water levels the canal depends on for operations. The disruption adds to months of pressure on global trade routes already strained by the Iran war, compounding concerns about supply chain resilience across key shipping corridors. Turning to development. Russia removes rights of citizens abroad in sweeping new traitor law. The new law will strip the property rights, bank accounts and consular services of Russians living abroad who face prosecution at home on political grounds, in measures lawyers say amount to the de facto revocation of citizenship. OpenAI AI models went rogue during testing, triggering breach. An autonomous agent powered by its advanced artificial intelligence models went rogue during a security test and triggered a hack that compromised the infrastructure of AI startup Hugging Face last week. The ChatGPT creator was testing capabilities of some of its most advanced models in a controlled environment, but the agent escaped containment, reached the internet, and broke into Hugging Face to satisfy its testing goal. Sea cannibal spreads across the Baltic, threatening native species. The comb jelly Menemyopsis laidii, an invasive species capable of consuming fish eggs and larvae at a rate that decimates future stocks of sprats and sardines, is accelerating its spread through the Baltic Sea, aided in part by the expansion of oxygen-depleted zones. The species earned its nickname partly through cannibalism, and previously reached densities of 400 individuals per cubic meter during a 1988 Black Sea invasion that collapsed local fisheries before the population eventually crashed through exhaustion of its own food supply. Moldova's solar boom bolsters national energy security. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 reshaped regional energy markets, Moldova began looking to renewables to update its electricity sector and reduce reliance on imported Russian energy. As solar capacity from rooftop solar, large solar farms and battery storage reaches record levels, renewables are no longer just about climate goals. They have also become a cornerstone of Moldova's energy security and economic resilience. Bordeaux under threat as France and Spain battle unprecedented wildfires. The fire in southwest France was heading towards the historic French city of Bordeaux, at the heart of the country's winelands, as authorities in France and Spain battled wildfires that have forced roughly 300,000 people from their homes across both countries. Finally, our social news. Rich countries have 10 times as many doctors per person as poor ones. A person's access to doctors depends heavily on the income level of the country they live in. The global average is around 1.9 doctors per 1,000 people. Low-income countries have around 1/5 of that figure. Why 156 years old is the maximum human lifespan. A new mathematical model suggests that's the longest a human could live, even if every reversible cause of aging were eliminated. Neurons and heart cells, which cannot divide or replace themselves, tend to accumulate irreversible DNA damage over time. Organs that regenerate, like the liver, could theoretically survive for thousands of years, but the brain and heart set the hard ceiling on human longevity. Whale supergroups signal population rebound, but Iran war poses new threat. The formation of vast feeding aggregations, rarely seen before the 1986 international whaling ban, is being interpreted by scientists as evidence that some southern hemisphere whale species have made a strong recovery over the past 4 decades. However, the Iran war now threatens that progress, with increased shipping disruption, naval activity and potential oil spills in key cetacean habitats, raising concern among marine biologists. 500,000-year-old elephant bone hammer shows ancient humans were master toolmakers. Early humans in England crafted a rare piece of elephant bone into a reusable hammer for sharpening stone tools nearly 500,000 years ago. The extraordinary find reveals that ancient toolmakers were resourceful, skilled, and capable of surprisingly advanced planning. Bamboos to beat desertification. China turns fast-growing grass into green sand barriers. Researchers from the Chinese Academy of Forestry are introducing bamboo-based barriers and trays to stabilize shifting sands. It could offer an eco-friendly alternative to existing sand-fixing methods. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.